welcome back. It's Christina again with the Artist Pod, and today we're going to talk about how to draw an Emperor Tamarin. So, let's get arting. Alright, so here is the Emperor Tamarin. They have several different colors. They have some pink under their noses here, covered by white. They also have some pink around their eyes. They have kind of a dark brown here, and then it goes into like a grayish all over here, and then of course all of this is white. So, I'm going to get started with the pink. The pink will be covered, so it doesn't need to be perfect. It just should help define a shape. And of course, because it's the skin underneath, don't have to worry about how long the strokes are until I get to the hair. The hair on the nose is pretty long. Through here it's not as long. But these strands are pretty long down the sides. His little mustache. As I bring it down to where his mouth would be, I'm looping it in, right? Like I'm kind of bending the lines inward. Likewise on this side, I'll do it kind of the opposite direction. But same idea. Without being too long. Their chins are kind of a weird shape. They don't have like the traditional big loop. It's like they have these two humps coming off of their mouth. Now that we have the pink, we'll do the dark brown, which is right against the face, and has shorter fur right in this facial spot, particularly by the nose. This is typical of other animals. It gets longer as it comes up in here. Now we'll get into this lighter gray color up here. Now the hair on his mouth starts short, and then obviously as it comes over it's going to get longer as it turns into those long sort of mustache that he's got. Same thing on this side. These long swipes of hair. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight, it's a little messy. Alright, he's looking pretty cute so far. So I'm actually going to add the highlights onto the pink first, since that's going to be kind of buried under the white for the most part, except by his eyes. That'll give me a chance to layer the white on top. As I do it, I'll need to be a little bit careful in that I don't want the pink to dominate. I want the white to be able to, so I'm probably going to hold back a bit on pin pressure. And maybe give it a little burst here and there, but otherwise not fully brighten up this pink. Although it does depend. I might add some, again, highlights and shadows. Alright, and I didn't really talk about it yet, but I should probably say my light source is coming from over here. And that means, of course, as always, it's coming from above and in front of, not behind or to the side. The pink, because I didn't have to worry about what I was doing just there, I wasn't worrying about adding a differentiation. I wasn't really thinking about it as much because I was just sort of evenly applying it. But in a moment, it's going to obviously come into play. I think I am going to give it a little bit more burst than I was originally planning on it. Still not full pin pressure, but at least enough to give it some definition. Just fixing his nostril here. Okay. Brighten it up just a bit. Edge would be in shadow, so I'm not coming all the way over to the edge. Under the mouth is going to be in shadow. The exception being with the white of the hair, because of how it is, it may actually be jutting forward and casting a more of a highlight than the pink of the skin would. Pink of the skin's following the contour. Hair doesn't always follow that. Be a little burst under the nose, under the nostril here, because that's coming out of a recess and catching the light, whereas the top is going into a recess and therefore in shadow. And then there's a little bit of a dip in the middle here. Certainly has light at the top, and then it dips down. That means it'll catch the light on the other side. And then we'll start to fade it off, because it'll be you know, the roundness of the face itself is rounding away from the light source, so have this last little burst here and then kind of fade it out. I'll do kind of the same thing underneath. Have a little bit of a burst. I'm leaving a gap because the mouth would be probably casting a shadow above that. Casting a gap for it to round underneath. Just like with the upper lip, there's a little dip here, and then it catches the light on the other side as it comes back in. Higher up here because the mouth is slightly open. Here it's closed, or it's connected, and so you wouldn't see as much. That shadow would be a deeper cast on this side than where it's already lifted up. And then quickly fading this off into shadow. And I'm just going to straighten out his bottom lip. Now we'll get by his eyes. Skin by his eyes. There'd be highlight underneath his eye here, where there'll be shadow on the top. And this is full pin pressure. This isn't covered by hair, it's just got the skin. On the top we have just that little bit of shadow, and probably a little bit of shadow on this side before it kicks into highlight over here. And then a little bit up here where there's like a little flash of skin on some of them from what I could tell. It is going to be under the hair, so it's not going to be all that much, but I do want to make sure you can see it. On this side, same thing, we have that little bit of shadowing by the eye. Underneath, it's probably going to have the highlight on this side and go into shadow on that back side. Highlight rounding over, and then it goes into shadow on this. And then underneath, we'll also be catching the light, because again our eyes are coming out of a recess, so the light would be hitting right underneath it and a little bit to the side. But maybe not on this side, like there might be a little bit of shadow before it hits the highlight, because you have the bend of the nose that's catching a little bit of shadow. But once you're clear of the nose, there should be full highlight underneath the eye. And then again, same on this side. It's on the forehead, so it likely would be catching a good highlight just like the other one was. Ready to get that dark brown done. Probably just like there's a shadow over here, there might be a little bit of a shadow because of the way the face is dipping on this side, but it's likely picking into highlight pretty fast. And then of course you're going to have highlight through here. I do think this rounds up a bit and would go into shadow as it connects into the bigger, fluffier, sort of grayer fur, lighter fur. So I'm going to taper this off. It's not always the case. It depends on the animal. I feel like when I did my research, they all had this darker ridge here. And I always do research on an animal I'm going to draw, even if I've drawn it before. It just helps, get it in your mind, figure out what makes that animal distinctive. There's so many little details on animals, and you certainly can get used to certain patterns always being the same, but I never want to get so complacent I make a glaring mistake in a drawing. I mean, shadows and highlights can adjust a lot of things, but it's just my way of, making sure I have it right. Of course, even doing the research, sometimes I realize I forgot to look something up, or I forgot to specifically pay attention. Right now, I'm not 100% certain what color their ears are, so I do have Google open. I'll probably have to switch back over and take a look. But it can be little things like that. You don't realize, you don't know it until you're drawing it, and then you realize you're not really certain. And I like to double check. Now the nose has a little bit of a hump. It's going to be catching the light here. So as it rounds over to this side, it's going to go into shadow instead. But under the eye here, we'll probably pick up highlight, because it's going to be at least brighter than the skin, right? Like, you don't want the skin to be this highlight and then the fur around it to not. So it needs to have that same kind of brightness to it, just like there would here. Because where this kind of sometimes rounds away, right, you have the ball, and the ball's rounding away. On this side, as the ball sort of circles, it catches the light. Probably goes into a little bit of shadow, though, as that edge, dumps over the eye, right? Like you're having that round away happen. And then here, where you have a little bit of a shadow cast, to make sure you get that spot right. So I'm just going to taper back my pin pressure. Like I like to do, if I taper it back, I have more control over exactly where I'm putting a highlight. Lets me feather it in a bit easier. Just fixing the nose here, making sure that this light is rounding in the right spot before we have it cutting down into shadow, and then kicking in some light under here. But I need to make sure this is also feathered out, so there's no extreme change in light or shadow. And that does a good job of sort of pulling his cheek forward. Silver done before we go into the white. Just like there's a shadow where this is connecting up, there would be a shadow therefore where the silver or the gray is connecting down. If it's casting a shadow, then there's a hump, right? And so both sides need to have a little bit of shadowing before it would catch the highlight. And I just have to make sure it's feathered right, so that again it looks like a transition from shadow, not a transition from one color to another, and that it's creating a flopped over spot. And then of course, also like always, edges are always in shadow, so as we come to the edge of his face, all of this would be in shadow. I feel like this color is a little too bright. I might have to tone it down. I am going to go ahead and do that. Yeah, I think that's a bit better. I'm probably going to change a bit how the shadow is showing up. we have the white on his face. Now on the nose closest to the middle, it becomes much more sparse. You know, you can kind of see through the white. As it moves over, it's going to thicken up. Because you can't really see the edge very easily before this really like thickens. Now there's going to be a layer of hair above catching the light and a layer of hair underneath that is in shadow. I tapered this off, but some of this is going to be in highlight. The way his face is shaped, it's going to certainly catch a bit. So I'll be making some adjustments there too, but again, because it's on that shadowed side, I want that control over where exactly it's going, which is why I'm holding back on the pin pressure completely. I might do something similar over here, especially on the interiors. I sort of sort out what's going to be in highlight, what's going to be in shadow. When you're doing long hair like this, having gaps, you know, like it's not full thick hair, right? Like it's hair kind of coming down, so I am going to be leaving gaps so it's not all one uniform line. That'll help give it that sense of realism too. And like it did over here, you know, messing it up, having hair going in different directions. I'm thickening up the top here to hide the transition between the nose and the rest of the face. Still leaving gaps, just adding a little bit of an extra burst and mimicking on this side where I had the hair kicking in on that side, and then just adding some messed up directions down in his beard. Not all smooth there either, especially since it's long. It's doubtful that it would be. Okay, now I'm trying to decide if I like the color. I feel like there's still just something a little off. I'm gonna maybe make him a little browner. Maybe that a little grayer. Let's see how this looks. And I'm just taking, so here I did that brightening up of his face a little bit. Well, yeah, I'm gonna copy it. I'm gonna merge them together. So to do that, I'm gonna select the top layer, which is the one I added after. I'm gonna come to layer and I'm gonna merge down. So now all of that's just one. Okay. I'm gonna select all and then I'm gonna nudge it and that'll highlight it. Create a new layer and I'm gonna just fill it in with the foreground color. Should be a bit darker than he was. Yeah, I think that's a little closer. And then I'm gonna change this color again. I'm gonna add some color to it. Yeah, I feel like that's probably more accurate. Just brightening this up on this side. I took a look back at Google. Look back at some of their pictures, and I think the hair here would be a bit more forward. Wouldn't be following the face around, it's going to be jutting more forward, so I'm going to have it in that highlight. And then I'm going to fill this in a bit more. While I want the edge to be visible, I don't want it to be too prominent, because it's not really, like, you can see it, but there are moments where you can't, and so I'm just brightening up the white. Make that distinction a little harder. That gives him a good mustache there. A little bit more so that fades nicely into it, just like I did on that other side. And then I noticed that the pink doesn't show up as nicely on this side as it does on the other. So I'm just going to brighten it up. Make sure I'm on the right layer. Well, maybe not that much. Yeah, okay, there we go. Now you can see it, it's definitely there. And while we're at it, the ears have a ton of this color kind of coming through it, but it also has some of this pinkish on the edge. So what I'm doing here is I'm just, when I come to an edge, I like to sort of fold it in, round it in, like I'm rounding it as I come, doing little semicircles just on the edge. Same up there. Do the same over here. It almost looks like the ear has this extra flap of hair that comes out on it that doesn't cover the whole thing. So we're just going to do that. Blending it together just a bit. There still will be an obvious separation, but it'll help it look a little bit more natural. On this side, we are going to add a little bit of highlight too. Although probably not like that. And I am going to actually go ahead and mess up this edge. So I feel like it would be a little messy. Which means I'm going to do the same thing over here. I can add just a little bit of probably some messed up to him. He's got some long flappy hair. They have brown eyes. Choose a spot and go. Might bring this up higher. It's pretty low. I'm just going to come in and fix the edge, even though I know I just selected erase the section. Sometimes because of how I draw, that leaves gaps. So I'm just filling in the connections from line to line. So, let me do one other thing. I have this stray line coming up. Just going to trim it down. So light source, coming from above and to the right. So that means that on this inside edge is going to be a burst of light. It's on the opposite side of the light source. Always where that, pupil's coming out of the recess. Same on this side. And then I'm going to fill it in with the full pin pressure right on the side of the light source going into shadow, but underneath will also be full pin pressure, right? This top edge would also be shadow and the outside edge is going to be shadow. This inside edge of the pupil is going to be in shadow as well. So we'll get it up there. We'll be connecting to this burst underneath. All of this, but again going into the shadow. And then tapering off the pin pressure. I'm just debating on if I should bring his eye up a little bit more. He still has so much empty space here because their eyes are relatively big. But I don't want him to look too shocked. I also don't want him to look bored. I'm just going to lightly fill in the top. I do think that helps it. We'll temper that out as we go. I'm going to move to the other eye after I fill in a small gap here. Okay. Same thing. You have brightness over here going to brightness underneath. and then going into shadow after that. Alright, now we're going to do the same thing on this side that we did on the other. Very loose lines on top. And then we'll feather it all in. Don't often do this. I know I've said that before. Usually cut it off. I'll do it sometimes with owls and things. And still it kind of keeps his expression, but it keeps him from kind of looking bored. Like I always say, the light flare is one of the most important parts. You want a nice solid sort of burst of light. So I'm always going to do it on the shadowed side first. You do the light burst, that sort of light flare on the side of the light source. It's where, you know, our eyes are a circle and it would be catching the light. And so I'm just going to do that. And I'm going to hit fill, foreground color, which I've already changed, and then move it over and do the same thing. Alright, so that is how you draw an Emperor Tamarin. I hope that was helpful. In the floating nether next to me, I have other videos of art tutorials I have done, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Take care.